Chapter 3. Where would you like me to drive you, Mr. Stevenson? Gabe's limo driver asked as he opened the car door. I have appointment with Grant's lawyer downtown. Thanks, Henry. Gabe sat down in the limo, resting his head against the headrest as the car drove away. His thoughts returned to what Rory's aunts had hurriedly whispered in his ear this morning, while their niece had been upstairs changing her clothes. I'm afraid all this trouble might have come to us because of Rory's past. Aunt Fawn started to tell Gabe the story, a solemn expression in her gray eyes. You see, before Rory was born, her father had a mistress. He'd convinced Rory's mum he loved her, but his actions proved otherwise. Maybe the mistress is trying somehow to get back at our Rory. We also have an older sister, Rory's Aunt Mallory. Last time Mallory saw Rory was when she was 5 years old, I believe. Mallory always told Delaney that she spoiled the little princess too much. Mal complained that Rory got everything that should have come to her, but never did. But we haven't heard from Mallory for a long time, so I don't think there's anything to worry about there. Aunt Florrie sighed heavily and looked over at Gabe. We don't know for certain if someone is trying to harm Rory, but will you look into this and help us find a way to protect our niece? And without telling her about this conversation, Aunt Mary added. Gabe, of course, had agreed. His thoughts were still whirling when Henry opened the car door. We're here, sir. Startled, Gabe expelled a breath and gathered his briefcase. I'm on my way. Thanks, Henry. Gabe looked up at the old brick building. Large box-style gold letters of Sterling and Sons hung stately on the front of the building, giving the law office the impression of a resilient strength. It reminded him of Grand. Walking up the front steps, he remembered every Christmas Grand gave a gift to Robert Sterling, as a way of showing appreciation for all he did. They had been longtime friends, and Grand had trusted Mr. Sterling implicitly. Gabe introduced himself to the receptionist, who sent a quick message to her boss. The receptionist stood to her feet. Mr. Sterling will see you now, sir. Please follow me. Gabe followed the woman to a large office and was promptly greeted by the lawyer himself. Grand's old lawyer now had a completely white head of hair and more wrinkles on his face than Gabe remembered. He shook his hand, a large grin on his face. Gabe Stevenson. Always happy to have a member of Walker Stevenson's family in my office. Mr. Sterling, thanks for seeing me. You're doing well? Still alive and kicking, so I guess that's something. Mr. Sterling gestured for him to sit down, while he went to sit behind his desk. So what brings you here today, Gabe? Gabe expelled a heavy sigh and began to tell him about Grand's letter and the incidents that had been going on near the cottage. Rory and her 3 aunts are really looking forward to having the satellites set up around their cottage on Walker's Island. Yes, I remember the day Walker came to my office and let me know about his plans. I thought he had some good ideas. Still do. I'll ask my son Stephen to do the legwork on this. We'll get this in motion this week. Thanks, Mr. Sterling. That's a weight off my mind. My plan is to move to the island for a few weeks. I'm also looking to hire a team to set up hidden security cameras on the island. I'll sleep better at night knowing those are in place. Mr. Sterling eyed him for a moment before searching through his business cards. If you want someone you can trust to set up the security cameras and uncover who is behind the trouble on the island, Max Harrington is your man. He's a former Navy SEAL who now does his own work as a private investigator. He has a team of veterans who are very thorough. I've hired his team myself. Max can be trusted to be discreet. Gabe took the business card from Mr. Sterling. This is just what I need. Thanks, Mr. Sterling. I'll set up an appointment with him and see what he can do. Gabe stood to his feet and shook the old lawyer's hand. Now I know why Grand trusted you with so much, Mr. Sterling. Thank you. Well, I'm just happy to help one of Walker's family. Speaking of your great-grandfather and his plans, is there to be a Mrs. Gabe Stevenson in the near future? The old lawyer walked him to the door, a big grin on his face. I'm hoping there will be. Gabe hesitated and shook his head with a half-smile. He surprised himself in that moment, realizing it was true. I'll send you and Mrs. Sterling an invitation when I know for sure. You do that, my boy. We'll be there. On your wedding day, I can give you the deed of ownership for your inheritance of Walker's Island. Mr. Sterling patted him on the back. That sounds good. Thanks again, Mr. Sterling. Gabe chuckled and shook his hand before hurrying out to the waiting limo. He laughed a little as he thought of what he'd just told Grant's old lawyer. There might be a Mrs. Gabe Stevenson in the near future. That's the first time he'd said that out loud and thought of a woman he would really like to wear that title. A certain blonde-haired island beauty, who was part imp and part mermaid, came to mind. Gabe shook his head. Was he really thinking of doing this? He would only do this to lay claim to Walker's Island. He was not going to allow himself to be in the position to be vulnerable to anyone else. Memories of what happened to his dad returned in full force. No, he would need to keep his emotions under control and make this strictly a marriage of convenience. Before Gabe took the leap, he really needed to talk to someone he respected. As Henry dropped him off at the condo, Gabe thought of Cyrus Noble's charity event tonight. Maybe he would find a moment to get advice from Adam or Jack. His older brothers had already been through this. He trusted them to help steer him in the right direction. Jazz music filled the air with sultry, soft tones as Gabe walked into the massive ballroom of the Noble Seascape Hotel. It was one of the most elegant hotels in Seattle. This place was close to the waterfront, and the beautiful view drew visitors from all over the world. Gabe adjusted the front of his tuxedo, already eager to get out of his penguin suit, but that would have to wait. Looking around the room, he spotted his friend from college, Dan Summers. He'd been friends with Dan's older brother Billy years ago. When Billy died, Gabe started befriending Danny, and they had continued to stay in touch with each other ever since. Dan stood near the water fountain and waved him over. Hey man, it's good to see you. Dan grabbed his hand, a grin on his face. Good to see you too, Dan. How's the marina business going? Gabe had always thought it ideal that Dan's father had been able to use their family name to their advantage. Summers Seaside Marina was a popular destination for residents and tourists alike. It's going well, Gabe. I'm busier than ever. Dad wants to retire so he can take Mom traveling. Looks like I'll be taking over the company soon. His friend shrugged. I guess it's time for me to step up to my family responsibility. Well, that sounds good, Dan. You and Amy planning on getting married any time soon? Gabe remembered Dan's girlfriend from college and how perfect Amy seemed for him. We're planning a Christmas wedding as we speak. Dan's gaze narrowed as if trying to draw out Gabe's secrets. Speaking of getting married, I loved watching Winnie O quiz you on your love life in that recent interview. Gabe grimaced as his friend chuckled. Yeah, that was uncomfortable, to say the least. Yet you seemed to win the audience anyway, Gabe. You were great. So, is it true that you need to marry soon to get your great-grandfather's inheritance? Sadly, yes. I'm still undecided if I'll take on that challenge or not. Gabe rubbed the back of his neck. I think you should, Gabe. It's a beautiful island. Dan looked over his shoulder for a moment and grimaced, speaking in a half-whisper. Only make sure you choose the right woman. Maddie seems eager for the position. She's walking this way. What? Gabe's stomach lurched as he turned to see his old girlfriend making her way towards him. Dan looked at him with a better you than me sardonic grin. Have fun, Gabe. See you later. His friend walked away before Gabe could find a reason for him to stay. Gabe really didn't want to talk to Maddie. As she drew nearer, he caught a glimpse of a low-cut red evening gown with a slit that was cut high up to her thighs. Gabe quickly moved his gaze up to her face. Her green eyes were pouty and flirty, just like the rest of her. Her sparkling jewels and glittering makeup had always seemed overdone. It didn't appeal to him. Suddenly an image of Rory wearing shorts and a t-shirt, walking along the beach, formed in his mind. To Gabe, Rory was more beautiful in her natural state than Maddie or any of the women here tonight. Where did that thought come from? No sooner had he tamped down those thoughts than Maddie appeared at his side. Gabe Stevenson, I never doubted I'd find you here tonight. Maddie stood near him and slipped one hand into the curve of his arm as if she belonged there. You always seem to show up at these charity events. I guess it's good for your image, so why not? Maddie looked up at him, a flirtatious smile on her face. Maddie, you're mistaken. I only show up for causes I believe in, not because I want to look good. Irritated, Gabe started to step away from her. Before he could pull his arm away, the flash of a nearby camera nearly blinded him. He looked in front of them and saw a cameraman trying to get another picture of them. Gabe pulled his arm away from Maddie and quickly showed his back to the cameraman. What's wrong, Gabe? Are you suddenly shy of the camera? Maddie persisted. Gabe's brows puckered in frustration as he turned to look at her. Honestly, I do get tired of being constantly in the spotlight. Looking down at her, he could see a spark of confusion. I would never get tired of being in front of the camera. And therein lay the difference between them, Gabe thought. When he was in front of the camera, it was from an effort to help people discover their best self and to help them break off limitations so they could get ahead in life. For Maddie, it seemed her sole purpose was to show her face and figure for the world to admire. Gabe bit back his frustration and instead asked pointedly, Maddie, what is it that you want? Why, just to say hi. I knew you would be here tonight, and I thought maybe we could get together after the event. You know, we could catch up for old time's sake. Her lips formed a teasing pout that many men had fallen for, including him. But not this time. Sorry, but I must decline, Maddie. We already talked about this. I'm not interested in getting back together. Gabe was about to say more when suddenly the Master of Ceremonies walked up to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, if you could all take your seats, we'll be starting soon. Thank you. Sounds like that's my cue. As always, it's been interesting, Maddie. Gabe rescued his arm from her grip. Her brows furrowed in frustration, and he heard the click-clack of her designer shoe tapping a steady rhythm on the ballroom floor. You should really rethink your decision, Gabe. You might be sorry you ever let me go. I don't think so, Maddie. Enjoy your evening. Gabe stepped back and with a curt nod walked away. Looking over the large crowd mixed with designer dresses and tuxedos, he spotted Cyrus Noble talking with his brother Jack. Gabe joined them as they walked toward the table nearest the stage. Well, well, if it isn't Gabe Stevenson. Cyrus grabbed his hand and pulled him into a massive bear hug. Gabe couldn't help but grin as he was swallowed up in the strong arms of this giant of a man. Cyrus Noble was as mammoth in size as was his billion-dollar chain of luxury hotels. Cyrus released his hold on Gabe, slapped his back with a big grin and turned to speak to his wife. Anna, look what the cat dragged in. They had reached a large table where Cyrus's wife Anna stood talking with Jack's wife Bella and Adam's wife Al. Gabriel Stevenson, how nice that you've joined us. Anna Noble was much smaller than her husband, and was as classy as her husband was unrefined. She pulled him into a soft hug, and then with one hand tapped the seat beside her. Come sit on my other side, Gabe, and tell me what you've been up to lately. Gabe grinned and accepted Anna's kind invitation. It was nice to sit at the same table with this older couple he so admired. Anna and Cyrus were opposites, but were so in love with each other that all you could see were how well they completed each other. Gabe saw Cyrus as a father figure and mentor. He'd come to appreciate his advice in many areas of life and business. Cyrus leaned down, kissed his wife's cheek, and held the chair out for her. Anna sat down gracefully and started up the conversation. It's so nice to share a meal with the Stevenson brothers and their wives tonight. Two friends. Anna raised her glass, and they all joined in the toast. So, Gabriel, tell me what you're up to. Gabe leaned back and began to tell Anna about the many different events he had spoken at and the positive response from the audiences. Well, it sounds like you're having a real impact, Gabe. That doesn't surprise me. Anna's gentle smile of appreciation warmed his heart and reminded Gabe of his mother. She was his biggest supporter. What is surprising to me is why you're not married yet. Gabriel, you are a fine catch for any woman. Your two brothers are blissfully enjoying the married state, yet you're here without a woman on your arm. Why is that?" Both Adam and Jack grinned at him from across the table. Gabe squirmed in his chair. He didn't like it when the focus fell on him, especially around the topic of marriage. Both of his brothers had their arms around their wives, enjoying this conversation a little too much. "I guess I haven't found a woman I love enough to marry yet." Gabe took a long sip of water, hoping the topic would soon switch to something else. Cyrus set down his drink and spoke up. "Anna, love, didn't you watch Winnie O's interview with Gabe? He told the world that he has to marry by his birthday or lose the inheritance from his great-grandfather." Anna looked at her husband before turning back to Gabe. "Sorry, Gabe, I didn't see the interview. What do you inherit from your great-grandfather if you marry by your birthday?" "I'll get Walker's Island. It's a beautiful island of about 10 square miles that is basically untouched. It's beautiful." "You have plans for it, Gabriel?" Cyrus raised a curious eyebrow. Gabe nodded. "I do. I was thinking I would take one half of the island and make it into a resort. It would be a place where people could come for the health spa, but it would also be a place that would go hand in glove as an incentive for my personal development training. I'm still fleshing out ideas, but I think it has real potential." That is a good idea, Gabe." "Well, once you've built it, we'll be one of your first customers." Anna smiled and winked. "That's good that you have your goals laid out clearly. I'm sure it won't be long now until you're happily married." "Watch out, Gabe. It's my wife's mission in life to see everyone she knows happily married." Cyrus chuckled as he squeezed his wife's hand. "But on a more serious note, here's some fatherly advice. You'll know when you've met the woman you love because you won't be able to get through one day without thinking about her and doing everything in your power to make her happy. When you meet her, don't wait. Marry her and make her yours. That's what I did with Anna, and it changed my life." Cyrus kissed his wife's hand, and she smiled adoringly at her husband. "Thanks, Cyrus. I appreciate the advice." Gabe nodded, shifting in his seat as one finger traced the edge of his water glass. "I think we're making Gabe uncomfortable, Cyrus." Anna looked at her husband, who grinned. "You may be right. We can switch to another topic. I do have an idea I want to run by you, Gabe." Cyrus hesitated until the waiter set the dessert and coffee around the table. While everyone was enjoying dessert, Cyrus spoke again. "I want to ask if you'd be willing to be my keynote speaker for the conference I've scheduled for the managers and employees of the Noble Hotel chain." Gabe stared at him for a full minute before answering. This was something he had only dreamed about, never thinking that Cyrus Noble would actually ask him to speak at one of his hotel conferences. "Well, Gabe, what do you say?" "I'm truly honored that you would ask me, Cyrus. Speaking at one of your conferences would be incredible. That's something I've always wanted to do, but never thought I'd get the chance." Gabe grinned at his mentor. Good, good. I'm glad we'll be working together, son. I'll get you the dates of the next set of conferences as soon as my conference manager has them confirmed." Cyrus nodded and turned to talk to his brothers at the table. Gabe's head was still spinning, excited at working closely with Cyrus Noble. His mind whirled even as the speaker who stood at the podium began to address the crowd. When the speaker finished, Cyrus and Anna were immediately surrounded by a crowd of people. Gabe said his goodbyes and walked towards the exit with his brothers and their wives. "It was great to talk with Cyrus and Anna tonight." Gabe looked over at Jack, who wore a strange expression. It seemed like his brother was deeply pondering something. "I was slightly uncomfortable with all the questions about finding a wife, but that's okay. I'm getting used to it." "So, have you found a woman to marry?" Jack questioned. "I'm not sure." Gabe stood beside Jack and loosened his bow tie as they waited for their limousine drivers to arrive. "There's one woman I'm attracted to more than any other. Since my birthday is coming rather quickly, I'm thinking about following in your footsteps. Maybe a marriage of convenience is what I need to do to get my inheritance. It worked for you and Adam." That's true, Gabe, but take it from me. You need to figure out what she really needs so she'll agree to marry you. Jack studied him with those probing hazel eyes. Gabe pondered his words, realizing the one thing Rory needed more than anything was to move out of that cottage so she'd be safe. Gabe rubbed his jaw. Maybe he could convince Rory she needed him as much as he needed her. He only hoped she would see it the same way he did. Jack's pirate smile was back in full force. Gabe, you have that same look as you did when you used to plan your strategy to win against Dad in one of those Pinewood racing car tournaments years ago. Yeah, it feels about the same. Gabe felt that familiar flutter of warmth. He was focused on planning how he could win big time. Gabe's limo driver arrived, and he quickly pulled Jack into a quick hug. Thanks, Jack. I needed that advice. He quickly hugged Bella, Al, and Adam and hurried out to the waiting car. It looked like he had a few things to take care of before he went back to Walker's Island. Gabe only hoped Rory would agree to this new plan.